Hi everyone, I'm Joanna Penn from thecreativepenn.com, and today I'm here with Bryan Cohen. Hi Bryan.
Hey Joe, how you doing today?
I am good. Now, just a little introduction. Bryan is the author of YA novels and books for authors, as well as the creator of the Selling for Authors course. He writes book descriptions at Best Page Forward and co-hosts the Sell More Book Show with Jim Kukral, alongside a whole host of other things. So, Bryan, you are super busy these days, aren't you?
It's true. It's true. I'm always doing something. There's never an idle moment.
And you also have a new baby, which is kind of crazy. Now, one of the biggest questions I get is, how do I get everything done? And I'm, happily child-free and do all the things, I want to do. But I wanted to ask you, how are you managing all your business and creative tasks right now, as well as being a new dad?
Well, it's definitely a challenge. And I have to just thank all of my parent friend authors out there, because as soon as I even mentioned that my wife and I were expecting, we got so many suggestions and ideas and plans. And so just a big shout out to everybody there. But it is a challenge. And today is a momentous day while we're recording this, because today my wife and I dropped off our daughter at daycare for the first time. And so lots of emotions, big deal. But I think that when you are an author, when you're a creative entrepreneur, you have to really think about every hour in the day. You have to schedule. And when the baby is at home all day, which for stay-at-home parents, or if you don't have childcare, you don't have control over that. So I think that knowing when you have someone there to assist, like the last few months, my wife was on maternity leave, I will say, hey, I need to be in the office. I need to be working on this for the next hour. I'm recording this really important interview, so I need to be in here and maybe put the baby in the swing so maybe she falls asleep, because you can't guarantee anything. When you're a parent. And I think I didn't understand that fully until becoming a parent. And I'm sure there will be many, many changes as our daughter grows up. But I think you have to know what you need to do that day, what's the most important, because you're probably not going to get that many consecutive hours of work in a row.
So scheduling is obviously really important. Do you use any specific scheduling tools? Because, of course, you also do the podcast with Jim. You're working with other people, like we've booked in this time together. So, how are you scheduling? What are your tools?
So I am a big fan of just a regular Google Calendar app. I make sure that I have everything in there, including something that's not a meeting. If I say I have to work on this project from 3 to 5, it needs to be in the schedule or it's not going to get done. I'm also a paper to-do list person. I have about 15 journals that are just my daily to-do list every day. I could probably find my to-dos from 3 years ago if I really needed to, because I don't throw anything away, which my wife isn't happy about. But I really do think that writing things down, and if you can use apps that work for you. I've played with a ton of apps that I don't like, that I tried. I've tried all of the Trello and those kind of message boardy sort of things that allow you to communicate with the team. None of them has resonated with me, but I will try again until I find the one that works the best. Yeah.
And I also wanted to ask, if you don't mind, about how things have worked with your relationship, because people are asking me now, what if a spouse doesn't support our life, like in terms of being a writer and being an entrepreneur? Like, what are your tips for ensuring that or relationship tips for making sure your spouse can understand what we do? Because it's a very hard thing to explain to a partner. And it's certainly something that Jonathan and I talk about all the time, because it's not a proper job. Like, how has that gone down with your wife, your parents, your friends? How have you explained that, especially with a new baby, when I guess everyone's like, well, you should get a proper job, Bryan?
Actually, all these people are saying, oh, you should stay at home with the baby because you don't really work
You don't do
during
any
the
work.
Which I said, no, daycare is great. It's going to be fantastic. This is a great question, Joe, because my wife works a 9 to 5. And so she is in a very different lifestyle work-wise than I am. And there was a long period of time where I felt like she didn't necessarily understand the scope of everything. But the funny thing is, and maybe this isn't going to be helpful for everybody, but as things have gotten to be more successful, as she's seen kind of more of the results of what I've done, she starts to get, okay, I understand now why this 3 or 4 hour period is very necessary. I understand why you need the focus on this. But here's another thing I'll bring up, because not everyone's at that point where they're having success and can kind of point to that. But I did a workshop recently in Chicago, and an awesome fellow podcaster, Eric Marshall, was there with his wife and his 7th grader daughter, who's also a novelist, which I thought was amazing. Cool. But his wife was listening to the presentation, was listening to what I was talking about, went into publishing, went into writing, and she said, now I understand why he needs that time. Now I understand why that makes sense. So I think if you are running into a problem with a spouse, with a partner, and saying, and they don't seem to get it, let them in. See if you can share some of the things you're learning, share some of the things you're doing. And I know for a long time, my wife could put up with me talking about publishing for about 5 minutes at a time here or there. But slowly but surely, try to share what you're learning with your spouse, and they'll see how excited you are, and they'll start to understand better. Okay, now I get why there's a sign on the door that says, please don't disturb when this is closed. A lot of good that does me, but I'm trying. And I think you guys out there should try to share as much as you can as well.
Yeah, I know it's super hard. And but I think it's an important question because it's happening to more and more people now, is that, carving out time, especially when there's kids around, when it's like, well, shouldn't you spend more time with the kids or, whatever. So thanks for answering that. I think that's really important. Now, you've got this great course, Selling for Authors, which I've had a look through and it's brilliant. And you've got so many great tips, but I wanted to come to the funnel. So the funnel is something that, people talk about and everyone immediately thinks of like a kitchen funnel, but so what is, just going back to basics, what is a funnel in the sort of big marketing sense, but also what are some examples of good funnels for authors?
Sure. And you're right. People think of the kitchen funnel if they haven't heard anything. The reason we even use the term of a funnel is because it's wide at the top and narrower at the bottom. So if you're trying to think about gathering an audience of readers, not every person you talk to is going to buy your book. That's just how it is. And that's good because we don't want thriller readers to read our romances and leave us 1-star reviews. So it's a positive thing. But we are trying to kind of get as wide a swath of people as possible in the beginning. Usually that comes in the form of giving away something for free. We all do it. We give away a cheat sheet. You give away your author blueprint for nonfiction. And then for fiction, usually a story could be any length. Some people give away a novel or they give away a starter pack of novels. You don't have to. Don't worry if you only have one novel. You don't need to write 3 just to give them away for free. But it starts at the top. You're giving away something for free. And then you're kind of walking them through who you are, what you do, what other books you have. And not everybody who downloads that freebie is going to make it through that whole process. They'll unsubscribe after getting the freebie. That's just kind of how it goes sometimes. They will say, oh, I'm getting too much email, and they'll unsubscribe. But then there's going to be people who are still there as you've gone through the funnel to the narrower part of the funnel who say, I like this person's books. I'm going to buy one. And then you've got that person at that middle part of the funnel. But then we want to try to find, those 1,000 true fans, those people who will buy everything we put out ever. Those are the best people in the world. And those are at the narrowest part of the funnel because we're not going to get everyone through it. But walking people from the free area all the way to the point where they're actually buying our stuff all the time, that's the goal, that's the dream of the funnel. And the way I usually do that is by telling a little bit more about myself as I go along, kind of in the same boat as convincing a spouse that your career is worthwhile. It takes time. And so over time, you tell that story, you maybe offer more free things or you offer more opportunities to connect. And then eventually, after you've built that relationship up, then you tell them, hey, I have paid books that you can buy.
And I think the time thing is so important because, I was speaking in Australia recently and someone was like, but, your blueprint, it's like nearly 100 pages and it's amazing. And I'm like, yes, it's so amazing. But, but they said, I'm just starting out. What can I do? And I said to her, if you use the Wayback Machine, the internet Wayback Machine, you see how awful my website was in 2008. I had a blueprint up and it was about 3 pages. Because that's all I knew at the time. So, and then things change over time, don't they? I mean, you don't need to start off day one with the most amazing, lead magnet. You can start somewhere.
Yeah. You need to start. That's the most important part. You need to start. Like, if you're kind of in analysis paralysis of trying to figure out what the best thing is, it's going to keep you from writing and it's going to keep you from starting to gather readers.
And the other thing about time, like I was thinking about this as well, as someone just emailed me and they said, I stopped following you a couple of years ago because I just got distracted by my work and now I've found you again. So like, I totally agree with you in that people who go to the bottom and are like, I buy everything you put out there, but those people are quite rare. Whereas also if we're around a long time, like, you're turning into a veteran of the indie scene as well these days. You were once a newbie and now you're a veteran because everything moves so fast. But, if people are around you long enough, then they might be interested in something. So I think that longevity is so important too, isn't it? Have you seen that with other things that you've done?
Oh, I've seen it with fiction and nonfiction, and I've seen it with podcasting. Of course, we recently had our 150th episode of the Sell More Books show, and we asked, because, we have our question of the week in our comment section, and we asked, when did you come aboard? When did you find us? And we had several people who said, just 20 or 30 episodes ago. And then we had the people who said, I started listening in episode 2, went back and listened to episode 1, and then have listened ever since. And it's so great to see. And those are the people who we get emails from, who give us news tips, who are very interested in what we're working on. And when I did my workshop in Chicago recently, saw more hands than expected of people who listen to the show. And those are the people who will come out in person to support. I had people who drove over 100 miles to come see me. And I'm sure you had the same experience in Australia. It was probably 1,000 miles.
Yeah, it was. It was weird.
Yeah, but I mean, those are the people. Those are the lifers. And if you are around long enough, you're going to collect more lifers, and you'll collect people who forgot about you, found you later, and are very interested now.
And I should just say, I've been listening since episode 1 of the Sell More Book Show.
Thanks, Joe.
So
you're
I'm
a great
fan.
Supporter.
Yeah, and I listen every week. It's the only show I do listen to every week. So everybody, if you're not listening to the Sell More Book Show, go listen. It's actually, and in fact, I was talking to someone the other day, and I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure you and I just steal off each other. Like, whoever's first.
Now that you've started doing the news on Mondays, exactly. I just say, well, obviously this is newsworthy because Joe reported on it.
And it will be, but sometimes it arrives on like a Monday or a Tuesday and you get it on the Wednesday.
It's great.
It is. It's awesome. I love our ecosystem. Okay, so you were on the show, of course, last year or the year before. Time flies, talking about book sales description. So we're not going to go into that again. People can go listen to that show. But copywriting is also important for Amazon advertising, which is something that's very big right now for authors. and is difficult. I mean, like anything. So basically, if people haven't tried it, you have to come up with this like 1 or 2 lines, right? That is the description. So what is the best way to take a longer sales description and make that into a hook for an ad, whether that's Amazon or Facebook?
Well, I'll refer to another episode of yours where you talked with Adam Croft, the hook master. He obviously had a lot of success with his thriller, Her Last Tomorrow, and his big hook, which he used on all of his ads. But I will say that when you are trying to condense something, I think that it's almost better to treat it like you're writing poetry as opposed to prose, where you have a lot of different ideas of, well, what could this line be? Instead of our usual practice of we write a full book and then we say, let's change this sentence slightly, this sentence slightly. You need to come up with a lot of ideas, really dig into your subconscious here. I like to recommend writing 20 different ideas of 1 or 2 sentences that would really it would really embody what your book is about. It would really entice those genre readers. Like I said earlier, you don't want the thriller readers reading your romance book. You want, if it's romance, you're going to focus on the guy and the girl and if they get together. If it's a thriller, you'll focus on the plot and the bad guy and if he's going to destroy the world or not. You want to focus on the things that your genre is known for, that readers really enjoy. And you want to focus on that, and it needs to be short, sweet, to the point. And it's hard. This is not the kind of thing you're necessarily going to nail on day one, but you brainstorm a bunch of different ideas, you get some feedback from your readers, maybe you do a survey, and then you take the 2 or 3 best ones, and then you tweak. And then you're going to be able to come up with something stronger. But I'll also say, with Amazon ads, you can try a bunch of different headlines all at once. You can play with lots of different ideas, and then you see which one converts the best, and then you put more money into it.
And also, you could just go on Amazon and look at other people's.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, of course. Of course.
People forget that, though. They forget that if you actually spend a couple of hours, like I did the other day, spend a couple of hours like just trawling through people's ads. I mean, as a reader, you'll be like, yeah, that looks boring, or that definitely hooked me. And I ended up rewriting a ton of mine that were boring when I looked at them again. But this is the thing. I think what you're saying is really important, that you have to kind of play with it, don't you? Don't expect it to be right.
Yeah, this is not the kind of thing you nail on the first try. This is the sort of thing that gets massaged. You maybe come up with the idea late at night. It's something that's going to take time. But, we're talking a lot about the time here. It's going to take time to get it right. It's going to take testing and reiterating, but eventually, if you keep working on it, if you look at other ad ideas, I'm going to give another idea here. You look at your customer reviews or the reviews of books in your genre. Some of these reviewers should be copywriters. They write great little ad headlines for themselves for their reviews. So you check those out, bring in as much information as you can, and then just let it fly and see how it goes.
That's a great tip, actually. I hadn't thought about using the review quotes in the text, because you're so right. Like, some of them are really good. But then it's sometimes hard to distinguish ego from, advertising.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a constant struggle.
It really is, isn't it? Okay, so one of the other important things around selling for authors is obviously the book cover and the author, the branding of the book cover. And I mean, you talk a lot about this, but you've rebranded, or you're in the process of, I think, rebranding your TED Saves the World series and kind of looking at your own author brand using a pseudonym for fairy tale books. So can you talk, about your decisions around rebranding, the pseudonym, and just that kind of branding idea?
Sure, and I hope by the time this is posted, I actually make some progress on my TED rebranding. It kind of paused a bit as our baby was being born. But I think that just because a book hasn't sold, just because a series hasn't done well, it does not mean that it's dead forever. There is possibility to revive, because, and this is particularly true for self-publishing here, if you are self-publishing, you have control over more than you think. Because you put out a book and it doesn't do well. Well, what can I change? Well, what I'm changing on the TED Saves the World, which is Young Adult Superhero, I'm changing the titles. It's going to be, instead of the TED Saves the World series, it's going to be the Viral Superhero series. Because superhero, you like that better?
Yeah, I do.
Thank you. It's going to have superhero in the series name. If you can change the cover. I noticed when I launched the TED books, there wasn't really a consistent superhero branding. There is now, which is kind of a silhouetted figure in the background doing an action-y kind of pose. Now I've recommissioned covers. I use demonza.com for my covers, and they have done a great job, and I will release those to the world eventually. And what else can you change? Well, the content of the book. I took the book, which was the first novel I ever wrote, so it's not as good as what I write now, and have destroyed it, broken it down, built it back up again, and made sure especially that preview first couple thousand words is absolutely stellar. And that is going to, all those things combined, in addition to changing the copywriting, all of that stuff, is going to make it so it has a better chance of succeeding. Will it succeed? I still don't know because I haven't done it yet. But there are options. If you want to try to revive an old series, playing around with those options is going to be really helpful.
And I've just, Jay Thorne and I have just done a new cover for Risen Gods. We're repositioning it into urban fantasy, looking at a load of authors who write similar books to that. Because and this is the other thing, like people, again, I get so many emails. Someone emailed me and said, it's nice to know that your first book wasn't successful. And I'm like, hey, it's not just your first book that might not be successful. It can happen later on. And the thing is, it's very hard as an author to understand where you fit, especially with your first book, as you did with yours. And I did as well with Pentecost, which I later relaunched as Stone of Fire. So I totally get that. And I think, again, the importance of time in getting to know your own author voice and how you are positioned. So I just want to come back to the pseudonym. So tell us about the pseudonym, the fairy tale books, and why you made those choices.
Okay, so I write fairy tales, kind of young adult, new adult fairy tales as Casey Lane. Oh, you've just been spoiled, but I've kind of open about it.
I think you came out as Casey Lane a while ago.
Yeah, I did. But you have bigger listenership than I do. So Casey Lane, I decided to write as a different pen name just by looking at the genre and seeing, okay, well, some of the biggest names in this fairy tale genre, they're all either female or they have a gender ambiguous name. And who am I to mess with what the success the other people have had is? Because I didn't see any successful, obviously male authors, because there are a couple of male authors that have gender neutral names. So I said, well, I'm going to make a gender neutral name here. I'm going to use the cover of my book as my author photo on Amazon, so nobody really knows and nobody really thinks about it. And then I'm going to use that as the front. And I've come out with a novel, Cinderella Dreams of Fire, which is my best novel because it's my most recent one. And then I launched an anthology with a group of other authors in the genre, and that has actually done exceptionally well because people like box sets, people like lots of different options in their readings, and that book has had over 3 million pages read. That's been a really incredible experience. Yeah,
which is fascinating. So do you have, and I'm asking this because I'm doing another pen name as well with the Sweet Romance later this year, and which will be co-authored, but with one new name. So do you have a separate website, a separate funnel, a separate email list? Have you replicated everything?
Great question. Yeah, I do have a separate website. I have the whole funnel. So I have a series of 5 emails that are just for Casey Lane readers to go through. I've done separate promotions. I've done a lot of work with InstaFreebie. I have one of their professional plans there. And when you're going into fantasy fairy tales, that's very much an InstaFreebie friendly kind of place. For those of you who don't know InstaFreebie, it's a site where you essentially do giveaways of your lead magnet, or you do group giveaways with other authors in your genre, and you start to collect those email addresses, and then you can add them to your list, or you can do it automatically if you have MailChimp. But I've actually added over 6,000 readers just through InstaFreebie, just to the Casey Lane list through the various promotions I've done there.
Oh, that's very good. Is that a hot genre right now, the fairy tales?
I would say that it's hot at certain times of the year. I don't think I launched it at the right time when I did Cinderella, but when I launched the anthology in November, that was a very, very good time. I think that it's not, say, as hot as military space opera.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it does pretty well. It's a genre where you need a lot of content to succeed, I feel like. So the more books you have, you'll succeed.
I think that's true. There. Anyway, I just wondered because, of course, Beauty and the Beast is coming out with Emma Watson. And so just a question on this. Like, is there any IP issue with using Cinderella? Or, like, what is the issue with, like, could anyone use Beauty and the Beast?
Yes, actually. The way the IP works, and I did research into this before I wrote to make sure I didn't step on any toes.
Disney toes, yeah.
Yeah, oh, those are the biggest toes in the industry.
Don't step on them.
Yeah, oh. But I checked, and what is important is that Cinderella is public domain, Beauty and the Beast is public domain, but there are certain aspects of the movies that are not public domain. You could not write a Cinderella story where you have singing mice running around putting her dress together, because that's from the movie, not from the book. In the book, in the original story, it's actually these flying golden birds, which are in my novel because those are public domain. So you have to make sure you're not accidentally co-opting something that is from the movie, which is definitely Disney's IP.
Yeah, it's a really good point, and I want everyone to make sure they're aware of that, because it's so funny how often you assume something is in, like I was thinking about The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco, which I remember as being an amazing book, and but I went to try and read it again, and it was just so hard work. And I think that it was actually Christian Slater in the movie that I remember from my teenage years, because I had a crush on Christian Slater.
He does make everything better.
He really does. So it was really, it's funny what you remember from movies and then think they're in the book. Something to be very careful with. Okay, so I also wanted to ask you about building a network, because you talk very much about building a network in Selling for Authors, and you've been very good at this yourself. I mean, I remember when you first emailed me, I don't remember exactly, but I remember becoming aware of you and you reaching out and then meeting you. And so what are some of your top tips for building a network in a non-scammy way? Because there's a lot of emails I get that I don't become friends with the people, and also many people are introverts and struggle with networking. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, and I get that a lot, that last point especially. I've had people message me and say, I love the stuff you do on networking, but I could never do that myself. And I think that's a limiting belief. I think that we are afraid of the idea of networking. Like, we only think of it as going to a conference and trying to introduce ourselves to complete strangers. But it is not like that. And thankfully, we live in this wonderful world. We live in this amazing world where we can tweet people and not have to meet them in person, where we can send a message on Facebook or an email, and we don't have to worry about, we send it off and then our hands are off of that. We're done. It's that part is over. And so I think the challenge is, if we say, all right, I see a person I would like to connect with, we need to just build up, and I kind of stole this from the book Level Up Your Life. You need to build up those 30 seconds of courage, just long enough to click that send button, to make that initial contact. Because I believe we started, I asked to submit a guest post to the Creative Penn when you were doing a lot of guest posts. And so there was an opportunity there for us to connect. But it later ended up being, I think, us working together in multi-author Facebook group and the multi-author Facebook events.
I think it was that.
Yeah, because that was March to a Bestseller, which I've run a few of those. It's March. Maybe I should do another one. But it's April when this gets posted. The magic is gone. But I think that you need to find something you're good at, that you like doing, that you can maybe do for other people. For me, I used to produce theater. I've produced live events. And so producing a Facebook event where it's kind of like a live event, except you don't have to put on pants, is that you can connect with a lot of people at once. And so I asked a bunch of people who I maybe knew slightly or didn't know that well, but I remember the first event I had Steve Scott, I think Mary Buckham, a lot of these great authors who I'd read, and said, hey, I'm putting this event together. We're going to sell a lot of books maybe, but if everybody promotes the event, everybody comes to the event, we will all do well and it will be great for everybody. And I think I actually co-opted the idea from Timothy Long, who was a guest on the Rocking Self-Publishing podcast, just to give credit where it's due, who did a zombie event. But I said, this will work great for nonfiction authors. And it did. We sold thousands and thousands of books over the course of that day because everyone just went through and clicked buy on all of the 99-cent books they hadn't purchased yet. And so for me, running that live event was something I was good at. And I knew if I asked people, can I help you promote your books by you joining this live event of mine, it would work well. That's not going to be, not everybody, I'm not saying you should all go out and run live events because that's not necessarily your strength. But I know when Jay Thorne was getting started, he was doing those box sets because he said, I know how to do HTML coding. Let's put all these box sets together. This was before Vellum, of course.
Yeah. And it's funny because I started my podcast back in 2009 because I thought, I'm reasonably technical and I can do something that other people aren't doing. If I interview people, authors, they will get a benefit from this. They will, that's why I started. I wanted to learn from them, but I thought I can't just get free consulting. So how about I start a podcast and do it that way? And I think you're totally right. And I talk about social karma. You know, you don't know how it's going to come back to you, but you're right that I noticed you because of March to a Bestseller. And basically, yeah, you did something. And then according to Influence, which you know by Robert Cialdini, the law of reciprocity means that people are more likely to hear you or read your email or notice your name if you've actually done something positive for them. So I think you're totally right. And that networking should be that way. And it's not transactional, is it? But it's that social karma. It's more like give and you'll receive in some other way.
And it's that time thing again, because it happens over time. You can't just ask for things. It's so funny because I remember this. I pestered you a couple times to try to get on the show.
And then I said, go away.
And you said no. And that was after we'd worked together on March to a Bestseller and after we'd even met. So we weren't quite at that point yet. And when I started doing my book description business, you said, first of all, you sent me an email that said crazy man because I was pricing my book descriptions too low. And then you said, okay, well, this is something that I would love to share. So this is a good opportunity. So you never know when you make a relationship. You can't just say, all right, I did this thing for you, so where's my thing in return? That isn't how it works. It takes time. You need to keep connecting. You need to continue to help. You need to continue to share and build the community, because over time, those things are going to come back, but you can't just want them. It's the same with a relationship with your spouse, with your partner. It's not, I give you something, you give me something. That's not how it works, or you're not going to last very long. You need to work over time. You need to get to know each other. It is very much like dating. And then eventually there's a reason for you to help each other, and it can work out splendidly.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think the importance of time is our title for this show. I mean, it's kind of crazy. But also, I mean, just coming back to the selling for authors and selling books. So I guess you've mentioned a few examples there, but how has your networking, say the Sell More Book Show, sorry, Bryan, I haven't read your fiction.
Don't worry about it.
You probably haven't read mine, but I'm a Patreon supporter of your show. So, and I know you're a Patreon supporter of my show, which is kind of random. But that's one example of selling in a way, because it's an income stream for both of us. It is the Patreon thing. But how can the networking and how, can some of these other things actually result in selling books?
Sure. And that's a great question. And thank you for being a Patreon supporter of the show. It is very appreciated. But when you build up a network in that particular genre, because obviously building up a network for Sell More Book Show has not necessarily helped me sell more fiction, because that's not how it works. When I launched my How to Write a Sizzling Synopsis nonfiction book for authors, that sold several thousand copies in the first week. And part of that was Sell More Book Show people we'd build up. Part of that was, hey, a friend I've known for a couple of years and that I've worked together with, would you be willing to email out about my book? And I even had an instance where someone accidentally emailed me for a promotion that week and said, oh, I meant to email the other Bryan. And I said, well, what's this promotion? And actually got in on that too. So it's good to be on the top of people's Gmail accidental contact editions, of course. But it's about the genre. So if you are trying to build up, say, an urban fantasy presence, you are going to want to connect with or make an effort to connect with and do something for people in your genre. So you would connect with some of those big time urban fantasy people and see if you could do something for them. That's kind of what I was doing with the fairy tale genre when I did the Once Upon a Happy Ending anthology. I said, who are the people? What can I do for them? Oh, well, I can make this kind of like a lead magnet for them and maybe make some money for them as well. And that means they are now connected with me. So when I release my next fairy tale novel, I will be able to tap into that network. So a lot of it is email sharing. I would say the easy answer to that is a lot of that is you share my email list, I share your email list, which usually only comes with the person, you trust the person, and you know that you're not going to be sending them to a terrible book. You know that it's good. And so having that network and then connecting with each other to share via email or via boosted Facebook posts, I've seen have some success. Usually the Facebook page needs at least a couple thousand for that to make any kind of impact. But there are definite ways to make networking directly pay off, but it still takes time to get to the point where that person is willing to share your email, your book via their email list.
No, it's a very good point. So you do have loads of specific tips, and we're going to do a webinar, aren't we? So
we are.
So tell people about what they will get in the webinar, in the free webinar that we're doing together, which will be super fun. Yes. Tell people about that.
Okay, so we're going to go over a ton of stuff. I've been told my webinars are very, very full of information and lots of people need to take notes. So be prepared to get some good info. But we're going to talk about how one author used copywriting to earn over $1 million with his books. We're going to talk about how an author used creating his funnel to actually quit his job, which is a wonderful thing. Jobs, who needs them? And we're going to talk about how an author made some great connections to help with the launch of a series that has done exceptionally well. And we will say not just those great stories, but we'll fill in all the gaps as to how you can apply those aspects of your copywriting, of your funnel building, and of your networking to sell more books and do really well for yourself in 2017.
And that is on Thursday, 13th of April at 3 p.m. US Eastern and 8 p.m. UK. So, and you can sign up at thecreativepenn.com/Bryan17. So thecreativepenn.com/Bryan17, and the links will be in the show notes. So I wanted to, before we finish, because we're almost out of time, but I did want to ask you about the Sell More Book Show, which we mentioned a couple of times. 2 years now you guys have been going, or is it 3 years? It must be 3 years.
By the time this episode comes out, it will have been 3 years.
Because you're at 150 and it's like a weekly show. So yeah, like 3 years. And what's interesting is sometimes, it feels like some news is similar some weeks and, you think, have things really moved on? But I wanted to ask you, what stands out in terms of how things have changed, like since you started doing the news and now? Like, have you noticed a shift?
Well, I think there's been two kind of shifts in the show, and one is Jim and I learning so much more that we actually know what is newsworthy and what isn't, which was not always the case at the beginning. Because you're learning, the first few episodes are always going to be a challenge. But I would say that the anti-self-publishing hit pieces that used to really crop up so much more often, those are a lot less frequent now. And you see a lot more success stories. I mean, just the last show that we produced was talking about 2 big indie launches of Adam Croft and of Mark Dawson. And having several news stories in one single episode saying indies made thousands and thousands of dollars in a wonderful show of marketing and patience and building over time. That's been the greatest thing, is seeing those stories happen more often, being able to talk about those. And you see the results in the listeners when people message you and say, this tip really worked well. It's such a good feeling. And I'm sure you get that all the time, just when you see that people are listening and taking action. Because it's not just about listening. I listen to your show. I listen to several other shows infrequently. And I know if I hear an idea that is going to potentially make me money and connect me more with readers, I want to put it into practice and I want to experiment with it. And that's always our biggest thing on Sell More Book Show. Try things, because you never know what's going to work. But you do know if you do the same thing over and over again, it's probably going to have diminishing returns.
That's true. And I've actually written down 2 things from our chat today. I mean, this is another reason I keep podcasting. And, the main reason I invite people on the show is because I'm still learning. We're all still learning. It's not like any of us become an expert and then that's it. It's like you keep learning all the time and you learn from other people. And so I've got 2 ideas to put into action. I also, given that the 2 authors you talked about there are British, have you seen a shift from American-centric news to more international news over the last few years? Because as indie has spread out of America, yes, it all started in America, but, do you feel like it is becoming more of an international movement now?
Oh, most definitely. And you've seen the kind of, it's funny because I'm this American course creator, and then there's been all these British course creators who've had so much success, and you have great courses, Nick and Mark and all of these, and I almost feel more like now it's an American upstart sort of situation versus it being very heavily focused on American sales. But I think it's been so great, and you're always several years ahead of the curve, and when we know and see that you're going to be getting, I forget the latest crazy island that you've sold a book in Kobo now, but those sales are going to become so much more important over time, and now we see the Kobo Plus, the subscription service in the Netherlands, and these kind of things happening not in the U.S. Things being first started not in the U.S. is going to happen more and more often because there's so much opportunity to sell ebooks and sell print-on-demand books throughout the world. I think the movement is already shifting, and it's going to shift more. And then there might be a little course correction, which always happens with American brands like Starbucks and such. Oh, we went too far. Let's scale back. But I think it's going to be really balanced over the world, and we're going to see that over the next few years. And authors like yourself who have positioned themselves well to capitalize on international sales will really be able to reap the benefits of that.
Oh, awesome. We're both optimists, aren't we? We always see the upside of what's coming. And again, coming back to our theme of time today, your daughter, who's now, very small. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you think about what's changed over the last 5 years as in indie, and we think, as her growing up, I think it's amazing to think where things could be when she's getting ready to read. It's just going to be so cool. So I'm looking forward to continuing together on the journey. We see more of each other now, which is nice. I agree, and I'll try to keep that up as my responsibilities at home grow. Yeah. So where can people find you and everything you do online? Well, if you love podcasts, which I think you do if you're listening to this show, you can go to sellmorebookshow.com or search Sell More Book Show in iTunes, and there you'll hear the Sell More Book Show. And I do too much stuff to give to all the crazy websites, so you can just go to bryancohen.com, and that's Bryan with a Y. I really should get the I too, but it's Bryan with a Y, Cohen.com, and you can check out all the crazy stuff that I'm up to over there. Fantastic. Thanks so much for your time, Bryan. That was great. Thank you, Joe.